Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
and who else?
Nick.
Nick. It's just Nick. You don't have a last name,
No,
Nick.
I'm just Nick.
It's
That's
just Nick. All right, so we just got some guy named Nick to come join us. No, this is Nick LaChance, and we've wanted to get him on for a while, right?
Yeah.
And you know, he's been so busy. He gets booked everywhere else, and he doesn't find the time for us. So welcome to the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast, and we are live. Well, we're not live. You're gonna watch this on tape, but we are together. This is not an illusion. We're all together, and this is outstanding. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Yeah. We're actually in Cleveland, Ohio, man, in the beautiful Midwest, and the Cleveland Indians still hanging in there, right?
Yeah.
The Cavaliers, not so much. Their season's done. The Browns, very, very high hopes, right?
Yeah.
For the Browns. So who knows, man? We could be in Titletown, USA at some point. You never know.
Hey, your lips to God's ears.
There you go. You never know.
What they want here.
You never know. Well, we're going to jump into a few topics today. And the first one, let's go around the horn on some current events. What is wrong with the Yankees? I mean, I have two Yankee fans here. So I want to hear what is going on with the Yankees.
You want to hit this one first? It's up to you.
Yeah, I'll go first. I don't know. It kind of seems like every time they're taking a couple steps forward, they take 3 steps back.
Right.
Like the first 2 games in the series against Seattle, they looked spectacular. Chapman wasn't closing unless it was an 11-run lead. But then, like yesterday, they only get 1 hit and get shut out. So also some weird chippy stuff at the end. I didn't really understand that. But
yeah, did we ever get to the bottom of that? Is there like DJ LeMahieu had something against that pitcher or something?
I don't know.
It was a history thing maybe there. Maybe. Had to be, right? All right, so what do you think? You're saying Chapman is definitely a problem, and I'll get back to him in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But the hitting also, you were mentioning to me on the ride here that it's just a really oddly constructed team.
I think it's just a poorly constructed team, a team that like is based on just if they don't hit home runs, they're not winning games.
Yep.
And like the fact that they're not hitting home runs at the level they even did in the mid 2000s, it's a team that doesn't steal bases. They don't field the ball well, and they don't pitch that well.
Yeah.
It's like they should be, in terms of the way they played, they're lucky to be a couple games over 500 and still like somewhat be in the hunt for something.
Yeah.
I just don't know like where you go from here in terms of what can you bring to make the playoffs and actually think you're going to make a legitimate push without making a big move.
And we're really quickly heading into the second half here. And so really separating the contenders from the pretenders. And if they go on like a losing streak, they could find themselves, a lot of games out. And the Red Sox and the Rays aren't really slowing down. The Rays did a little bit, but they picked it back up.
Yeah.
And so I'll ask you both now, trading deadline coming up. How do you fix this team? What are some things that you think you can do to get this team sparked in the second half?
I think it's more about being realistic. So, like, if they're at a point where it's like 5 games under 500, they get to the trade deadline, you got to be realistic in what can you get for certain parts, a Chapman, maybe a Gary Sanchez, and see if you can get prospects back. If they go on a run here and they can make it look like, all right, we can be competitive, you see what you can get to help the team make a playoff push. But if not, it's really about what these next 15 to 20 games can decide what direction they should go for the year and even forward.
Yeah, and out of the break, 8 out of their first 11 games are against the Red Sox. Right now,
they played the Red Sox 8 times after the break. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
I think Red Sox, Phillies, Red Sox, I think, if I remember right. But,
wow.
Yeah, just kind of like what Nick said. This roster, like, for me, I look at the top 6 guys of LeMahieu, Judge, Sanchez, Stanton, Voit, and Torres. All of them, except for maybe LeMahieu a little bit, like they all rely on the home run. And I think at least one of those guys has to go. Because like this is the first year where like everyone except for Voit has been for the most part healthy.
Yeah.
So this has been kind of like a problem that's there. But like when you have guys that kind of pop in, like a Clint Frazier, who's not as much of a home run hitter, or kind of some of those guys like Gio Urshela, who right now is batting 6th, 7th, before he'd be batting like 3rd, 4th, just because everyone else was hurt. I think they need somebody else in there because you look at a lot of like the big teams, like even though he's not playing well, Francisco Lindor, Fernando Tatis, Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout. Like a lot of those guys, they're not just home run hitters. They steal bases. They can win games in a lot different ways. But like Sanchez is a liability sometimes behind the plate. Stanton can't play the outfield. It's just they need something they gotta change something up.
They need to get hot here if they're playing I didn't realize that Red Sox 8 out of 11 games coming out of the break. That could be. I mean, if the Red Sox win 6 of those,
that'll decide.
Yeah, that's and the Phillies are no better either. So I think they can handle the Phillies. And I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. Joe Girardi looks miserable, and I don't know why. He looks like he's not having fun. All right, one more Yankee question, and I'll talk about. We'll get back to Chapman for 1 second. Aaron Boone. What do you do about Aaron Boone? I don't think they'll make a change in the middle of the season, right?
No, I don't.
But is Boone the long-term answer for this team?
I think it's getting to a point where you got to question it. Like I don't like Hal Steinbrenner came out and said like they're not making any moves, so everyone's going to stay throughout the season. But if they were to end up winning 80 games around there, not making the playoffs, I would be amazed if he's here next year. I'd be very surprised because like. He could say it's the players, but it's not a coincidence they're not. They don't get the best out of them either, and they're just like a lazy team sometimes. That has to be coaching as well. Yeah.
So you're saying that they're lazy sometimes? Wow, that's manager.
You could see it's a mental lapse because like them running the bases, sometimes it's like a little league team where like you can tell like that doesn't seem like all the players. It seems like something's not going right in terms of management as well.
Yeah. Wow. What about you?
I agree because like. I feel like this team doesn't have a lot of like juice. Like it seems like when they lose, they're just like, oh, whatever. Yeah. But also you can kind of see that in the manager. Like Boone really, like it's rare that he really even gets like upset at the manager or at the umpires. Like I think of Joe Girardi where like there were times where like he would get into players, like he would call them out publicly. Like I remember he got a lot of backlash for like calling out Sanchez and Dellin Betances.
A-Rod, he called out A-Rod a few times.
Even like the whole saga with Posada, DHing him and catching him. But like, I feel like Aaron Boone, that's not really his style, which is fine. But also it reflects in the players. And like, I know Aaron Judge isn't exactly like a guy that'll like really fire up a team like that. He's kind of like that Derek Jeter, like leading by example. Yeah. But like some of these other guys, like it doesn't seem like they really have much fire in them. And it's like, oh well, we lost, whatever.
They lack life, like as a team. Like I remember the 2017 team when they like kind of made their first push back with that new rebuilt team. They had so much energy. Like they would be down 5-0 in the 8th inning, and you'd be like, "There's still a chance." Yeah. This team, once they get down, I'm like, they're done. Like they're not coming back. Just like yesterday, down 3-0, get 1 hit for 9 innings. Like it's a consistent pattern that is like concerning.
Yeah. You know, the piece, and then we'll get to Chapman in 1 second, but the piece I was telling you yesterday, I think that the Yankees miss when I think about the Yankee championship teams in the 70s and in the 90s and thousands was they always had this unbelievable bench. You know, they would get these veterans that were towards the end of their careers and come off the bench and they would be fantastic, which you don't have right now where you can't really sit some of these guys down. I mean, if you go back to the 70s, you had, you know, Cliff Johnson and Paul Blair. You had all of these great veterans in the 90s teams. You had Wade Boggs, and Wade Boggs was platooning with Charlie Hayes, Darryl Strawberry, Tim Raines, Hall of Famer coming off the bench. They don't really have that on this team. So it's like you have to stick. I mean, their bench is thin. So you have to really stick with the guys that they're playing. So I sent you an article about a pitcher named Steve Blass. Have you ever heard of Steve Blass?
No.
Steve Blass pitched in a good part of the 60s, very, very good pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And in 1971, he had a career year. I think he won 16 games, and he had like a 2.10 ERA. Was in the running for the Cy Young that year, pitched great in the World Series. And the following year, he just lost it. And he just, I think he wound up with like a 7 or 8 ERA that next year. They gave him another chance the following year. By the middle of 1974, he was out of baseball. And he was still pretty young. It's probably like in his early to mid 30s. And so when a pitcher loses it these days, or they haven't said this really in years, but they used to say this, like Rick Ankiel. You guys remember him when he just totally lost it. they say he had Steve Blass disease. And that comes from that picture that I remember extremely well as a little kid. And so I sometimes look at Chapman and say that he has that, because Steve Blass they didn't measure velocity then, but he didn't lose his velocity, but he just couldn't throw strikes. He was like walking everybody all over the place. And so Chapman, what is going on with him?
I think it's all mental.
All mental.
Because like, I think nothing looks different in terms of like, he still hits 100. He'll still have like ridiculous pitches where like probably not 5 pitchers on the planet could throw as well as him. But once he walks someone, the panic sets in. You can tell when you watch him pitch. He doesn't have that calmness, and especially like he can't stop the bleeding. Once it starts, it's going to end up in like when he gave up the grand slam to let them tie the game against the Angels. He does that continuously where like he can strike out the side, but if he doesn't strike out that first batter, it can snowball and it can be a complete mess within seconds.
So it's a lot mental then, is what you're saying.
I would think so, yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think like, he really gets in his head very quickly. I thought back to Kansas City a couple weeks ago where he just kind of lost the strike zone. And then also like there was that weird exchange between him and Boone. And then he gave up a walk to a bases loaded walk to tie the game. And like you could tell he was just absolutely furious. Like he's yelling in his mitt and then goes into the dugout and does the whole like smashing and everything like that.
It was somebody he didn't want to intentionally walk, right? And
Yeah.
he felt like he could get them out. Yeah. You gotta just listen to your manager at that point.
Yeah, and I don't know. It seems like this happens like every like year or every
this
other
year.
year.
It's just more. It's like to a point where he's unpitchable because like every year he has what like it seems like a mental breakdown in certain innings where he's just done, like he's burnt out. But this year it's been like 2 weeks where he can't get anyone out. That's like why it's so concerning at this point.
Wow. If there's any position in baseball where you have to be mentally tough, it's closer, right?
Yeah.
Because you're gonna blow. Yeah, we weren't connected there.
We're recording again.
So if you have to be mentally tough. You have to be mentally tough as a closer. So, on the positive tip, listen, the Yankees can't wake up. They do have the talent. So on a positive tip, they could have a big second half. And I mean, we've seen it with a lot of teams. We've seen it with the Yankees even before. Let's switch gears real quick. The NBA, Phoenix up 2-0. Anybody surprised? It seems like these games haven't been that close. It looks like Giannis is healthy. He scored 40 points last night.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts so far in this NBA Finals?
I think this is going kind of how I expected. I think Milwaukee's good. I just think Phoenix has been underrated all year in terms of like no one believed they versed the Lakers in the first round. It's like, oh, it's LeBron. They still beat them. Every round it seems like they were doubted and they kind of just kept proving like they're better than anyone expected. I feel like because like a 51-21 record, that's not something to laugh at. But like I don't think anyone thought they'd carry over to the postseason and kind of like make it look fairly easy because none of these series for them have been particularly difficult, and it doesn't look like this one's going to be as of right now.
Okay. What are you thinking?
Yeah, because I think one of the biggest things I was looking at is like if Giannis is healthy, they might have a chance, and he looks healthy, but it also seems like they still don't have a chance. Like I would say maybe they'll do like a gentleman's sweep in 5 at this point. Chris Middleton, I feel like is very up and down. But also the fact that Giannis got this far, the fact that he came back so quickly from a pretty bad injury, I think says a lot about him. And he was trying to join this group of only one other guy, Michael Jordan, of winning multiple MVPs, a Defensive Player of the Year, and a title. But he still has a lot of time to do that. And I think Chris Paul knows, like, he might still have a couple years, whether he stays with Phoenix or goes to the Knicks, hopefully. Or
threw that in, huh? Goes to the Knicks. There you go.
But, like, I know he knows, like, getting to the finals is tough. And he's not going to let this opportunity pass him by.
He's been in the NBA 16 years. Yep. And it's amazing. He's played at a high level every year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to disagree slightly with both of you. I do think, I'm thinking back to, and it was much worse when Milwaukee lost those first 2 games to the Nets. Yeah. And they got waxed. I mean, what did they lose by almost 50 points, by 49 points and something like that in the second game? They came back and won that series. Now, Phoenix, I think, is a better team than the Nets, because I think Phoenix has leadership. I really think between Chris Paul and Monty Williams, their leadership is just phenomenal. They obviously have a ton of talent, as well. But I think Milwaukee's going to make this a series. I do think Phoenix is going to win. I think it's going to go at least 6 or 7. But I think that the Bucks are going to come back in Milwaukee. Those fans in Milwaukee really helped carry them in that net series.
Yeah.
And then they have as many fans watching outside as they have inside, which is amazing. And so I do think that they're going to come back and win a couple of games here in Milwaukee and make it a series, even though we haven't really seen any big signs yet, right? I mean, game 1 was close in the first half, and then it kind of second half wasn't really that close. And from last night, from everything I read, I didn't see the game last night, but everything I read, it just never felt like Milwaukee was in it last night.
Yeah.
So I do think it's going to be a longer series. I think the Bucks are going to make it series, but I'm with you on Phoenix winning. I just don't think it's going to be that quick. Now, if they win Sunday night, is it tomorrow night is the game?
Yeah.
If they win Sunday night, then yeah, it's done. 3-0.
Yeah, Milwaukee needs that one. If it's going to be anything.
Yeah, they've got to win that one. I think they will with the fans, and then see what happens in game 4. So all right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. I wanted to talk about a couple of kind of controversial topics, right? So, do you guys watch the Olympics? Right, the Olympics is great. I think winter, summer, those are sports that we never watched until the Olympics, except basketball.
Yeah, baseball is back.
Baseball is back this year too. Yeah.
I will just interject here. Baseball is interesting because there's a lot of guys that we know in there. Usually it's like amateur guys. But Todd Frazier's going to be there. David Robertson. Your boy Scott Kazmir.
Scott Kazmir is pitching?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Also,
okay.
He's more of a guy attached to a trivia question now. Tyler Austin is going to be there. Him and Aaron Judge in their major league debuts went back to back.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And is he the one who started the huge brawl in Boston? Yeah. Okay. Tyler, okay. But these are guys that haven't been in the big leagues, though. Yeah. But Todd Frazier, I think, had made the Pirates, but then he stepped aside, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, so Sha'Carri Richardson, even if you don't follow track and field, you've seen her and you saw what happened. So she fails a drug test. It was marijuana, and she's totally off the Olympic team. They thought they were still going to put her on the team, but she's totally off. And there's been a lot of controversy on whether or not she should be allowed still to compete, because marijuana is really not a performance enhancing drug, but it's on the use of banned substances. So what were you guys' thoughts there? Should she compete? Should she not compete? Should they have made an exception? Not make an exception? What do you guys think?
I think I personally would say make an exception, but for her own situation, I think she should have known they wouldn't. It's not as if it would be something smaller in state. It's the Olympics. It's an international board where they're not going to change a banned substance for one person at one time in history, just because the way obviously social events and everything is leading towards marijuana being completely legalized everywhere, not being an issue. And obviously where she was at the time, it was legalized, but she knew she was going to the Olympics within the month or two. Mm-hmm. So I feel for her, because obviously I know with her mother's passing and how much she was going through, and at 21 how difficult it can be. But it's a horrible situation, but it's kind of what can you do now other than kind of just support her and hope she makes it back when she gets in 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's hard because I think there's a lot of the political issues regarding marijuana. But for me, I do give her credit, trying to stay positive, because a lot of people who get caught with banned substances, I use with you the example of Mets legend Henry Mejia, who got banned from baseball for using 3 times. Every single time he said, I don't know how it got in my system. Yeah. So I do really applaud her for at least saying yeah, I did it. I'm human. But at the same time, kind of like what Nick said, it's not you're at some random event. This is the Olympics. This is where people will hold you to a higher standard, even if it's not necessarily fair. And it's sad to know that first of all, obviously she was really dealing with the passing of her mother, and I can't imagine how difficult that would be. Mm-hmm. But it also stinks that the difference between her smoking weed and drinking was really if she just got drunk one night, no one will be talking about it. Mm-hmm. But I guess also it kind of shows certain, whether it's running in the Olympics, whether it's doing something, there are certain things that like you just flat out aren't allowed to do. And like for me as a pastor, like I agree to say that I'm not going to consume alcohol. Like that's not to say that like legally I can't, like because I'm 31, I could. But like as a pastor, I'm saying I'm going to make that choice. Like Sha'Carri Richardson has to realize like, yes, you could do it, but also like maybe just wait until after the Olympics.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do feel bad, and I feel like that's something that we talked about a few weeks ago with Naomi Osaka. Is like there has to be a lot more support for mental health of athletes. Because where was her support? Like obviously, people were supporting her in making the Olympics, but where was her support when her mother died?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that like I don't know. People have to look at more.
I think that's the conversation that should be had. I think they can have the conversation whether marijuana should actually still be on the banned substance list. I have my own personal feelings on that, but I mean, if it's not performance enhancing, but do you also want your athletes just, weed it up all the time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Probably not. So, I think that piece is definitely missing, and they're still considered amateur athletes. Although I'm sure Simone Biles has made a ton of money.
Oh yeah.
They're still considered amateur, athletes. So there should be something. If you're getting ready to compete in the Olympics, that is, you've trained your whole life for that, more than likely, right? And you're on the world stage. I mean, the whole world, when you think about that, is watching. And these are milliseconds sometimes that it comes down to, especially with track and field.
Yeah.
And so how there's not, mental health for them, and maybe there is, and she didn't seek it, I don't know. But I think that's the conversation that should be had.
It's about what to do next. Honestly.
Exactly. What to
like
do
you
next.
can't really do anything now. The decision's been made. They're not going to go back on
They're
it.
not going to go back on it.
But just to figure out how you can avoid this, even though as rare it is, you don't see it happen a ton.
Yeah.
And someone as high profile as her that kind of like had the following she had to be out of the Olympics, but they kind of just need to think like, how can we avoid this from happening and causing, because it doesn't look good on pretty much like her, not real, but like the Olympics, people are going to judge them in a certain way. Like we have one of our better athletes, most like known athletes, and she's not going to be there at all.
Yeah. Yeah. You going to watch the Olympics?
Yeah. I'll definitely tune in.
You going to watch?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm interested also in basketball. That'll be quite the story.
Yeah.
Can I just rant for 1 second though with the basketball? I still, all these years later, I know the ship has sailed, but in 1992, right? I just so used to enjoy when they put the college players instead of the NBA players, because most of these games have been. There was one, right, where with the Stephon Marbury team, I think, where a lot of the big players didn't go. Somewhere around there, and they lost. Yeah. But outside of that, these games aren't even close.
No, not at all.
I mean, it should be closer because there's so many great foreign players. Luka Doncic playing on a team by himself could probably win a couple of games.
Yeah, he got Slovenia.
Yeah.
First time ever they made it.
I mean, so it in that case, it might be a little bit more interesting than it was the last several years, but put the college players back in there, man. I don't know. That was just me. Okay, quick trivia for you guys. So which one college player did make the 1992 Dream Team?
It's not Leitner.
Christian Laettner, absolutely.
Okay.
Good job. Yeah, Christian Laettner, who turned out to be an okay NBA player, right?
Not the hype he had.
Was a phenomenon. Christian Laettner was on that 92 team. Didn't play that much, but he was on there. All right, let's jump into this. So the Portland Trailblazers can't seem to get out of their own way. They fired their coach after 9 years. I thought Stotts did a very good job with that team. I'm not sure what they're looking for because I don't think that team is constructed to get to the finals. Although they've got two just great players. One just, I think, will be an all-time great at the end of his career, and one very, very solid player with McCollum. But outside of that, they haven't gotten any other stars. But Portland, for years and years and years, that fan base supports them. They sell out every game. They're very rabid. They generally always make the playoffs. It's rare that the Trailblazers are a bad team. So, but Portland, also the city of Portland, is politically a little different than some cities, and so word gets out, they fired their coach, word gets out that they're very close to possibly hiring Becky Hammond, who would be the first female coach in NBA history. And she's done a great job in San Antonio and she's filled in a couple of times for Greg Popovich when he couldn't be there. but they hired Chauncey Billups instead. And Chauncey Billups, the name just off the top of when I first heard the name, I'm like, that's a good hire. Because he was definitely a leader as an NBA player for years. And, won a couple of championships, one or two, maybe it was just one with the Detroit Pistons team.
Yeah.
But I remember him being with the Knicks, for a couple of years, doing a great job. Yeah. And with the Net, absolutely. So he just seems to be a natural leader, good fit as a head coach. I didn't realize that he had settled out of court, I guess his first year in the NBA, he was accused of sexual assault. I didn't even know that. And so this kind of gets brought back up. Not only did Portland pass on Becky Hammon, who has obviously more experience coaching than Chauncey Billups, and she in her own right was a great player. But not only do they pass on her, but they pick a guy who has this thing from 1997. And I'm purposely saying it that way because that's a long time ago. And we talk a lot about forgiveness in church, right? And I didn't even know about it. I think most people didn't, right? I don't remember it at all. So the fans are still getting on, the Trailblazers management's case of passing on Becky Hammon and hiring Chauncey Billups. What are you guys' thoughts about it?
I think it's a little strange for them. I think more like for Portland, like the Trailblazers themselves, they should have kind of known the climate in terms of like maybe avoiding letting that get out that you're going to hire Becky Hammon and then you not go back on it, but you change your mind and hire someone who's had a sexual assault in the past. Like that's I think the issue in terms of the optics of it. They should have kind of been more prepared for how it looks. And now, like, let's say Lillard's upset about, like, you've kind of messed up what could have been a good thing, just hiring a new coach, either if it was Hammond, if it was Billups, but you put those two together in the way they did, and it causes a situation they have now where it seems like there's a lot of uproar from fans, and it seems like the whole situation could get Damian Lillard, your, like, franchise player, out of there. So, like, it'd be a rough summer if that was all the case, and you come out with your fans not happy with this decision you made, and your best player and almost one of your better players in your franchise's history being out as well.
Okay. What do you think, Kenny?
Yeah, well, I'll just read this is from Wikipedia, so I can't fully say it's 100% reliable. 1997, Billups and former Celtic Ron Mercer were accused of sexually assaulting a woman at the home of teammate Antoine Walker. According to a civil suit, they assaulted the woman at the condo after leaving a Boston comedy club on November 9th, 1997. A medical examination the following day revealed injuries consistent with the victim's testimony. No criminal charges were filed, but Billups and Mercer settled a civil suit in 2000. And then it says that Portland did their investigation and they said that it's not going to stop him from getting it. But I think kind of like what Nick said, it just looks really bad because like you finally almost had the first female head coach in any league, in at least in American sports. And not only do you not hire her, but then you go completely in an opposite direction and hire someone that has a sexual assault. It looks really, really bad. I think Becky Hammon will at some point get a head coaching job. It doesn't seem like it's going to be this year because I think all of them are now filled, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think Orlando is getting ready to fill theirs.
Orlando, yeah. But either way, I think like it is hard because 1997, the guy's a rookie in the NBA. A lot's obviously happened since then. But like a sexual assault charge is something that's going to stick with you forever.
It is. And I totally forgot that he started with the Celtics, Chauncey Billups. He was drafted in the first round by the Celtics. And Ron Mercer, if I remember right, was a big-time college player at Kentucky. That didn't quite also, his game didn't translate to the NBA at all. That has nothing to do with anything. I'm sorry. But going back to this, so should it stick with you? I have my own thoughts on that, but what do you guys think? Should that stick with you? I mean, he's had a lot of chances, I think, Chauncey Billups, and from what I saw from his playing career, he was kind of a model citizen, right? And he was a leader on his teams. He was an announcer for a while after he retired. So you're right. I think stuff like that does stick with you, but should it?
That's the question, because it's like there's certain acts, like especially for athletes, they get away from, not away like from, but they can move on from them. Drug charges, things like that. When it comes to like moral things, like we question the character of your person, which is kind of what like a sexual assault, anything like that is. It seems like it's fair to stick with you in terms
Okay.
of just questioning his
Okay.
judgment, even if like they were completely false. He obviously, at least in that 1997 case, however it played out, got himself into a situation that was like questionable, and that's a judgment thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then that also, like, if let's say everything like that was in the report is fully true from that time, that's also a bad person. Like, it's a bad character thing. It's not like a certain trait, like, oh, he was young. That's like a character issue as well. So I feel like it's fair to stick with him, but to like kind of like not degrade its importance, but understand that it was a quarter of a century ago is also fair too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I really like that point. What do you think, Kenny?
Yeah, I think I think in general it's really hard to. I think people will always remember it. Luckily, like we have a God that forgives, but at the same time, like people don't forget stuff because even like Ray Lewis, who has probably one of the greatest NFL careers for any defensive guy, there's always people that are like, well, you know, that guy was pretty much like murdered people.
Yeah.
Um, and like, and it seems like for the most part, he's never had anything else come out, but like, also he did something that was really bad and only got away with it because like he ratted on the other guys.
That's the way it sort of seems with Ray Lewis. I think that's a really, really good example because he's gone on to have a spotless career. He's been a solid citizen throughout. He's given millions away in charities. I'm not sure if he's an actual pastor, but I know he preaches at a lot of churches and things like that. But yet, it's funny because I don't really even think about that with him anymore unless somebody brings it up.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do. And that, I'm not saying one is more serious, but this was a double murder.
Yeah.
Right. And not more serious than, because I'm sure that this young lady's life took definitely a different turn, you know, after that, especially three, you know, huge athletic guys, you know, however the story says it played out. You know, so let me hit on just the other quick topic on that, and that is Becky Hammond. I'd like to just see her get the job just on her merits, not because she's a lady.
Yeah.
So I guess what I was wondering is why didn't Portland just say we just felt like Billups was the better candidate? You know, they really did, I thought, a poor job explaining that.
I feel like they did, in terms of the way they handled the situation from when it leaked out that she was, I feel like they did a poor job.
Yeah.
Because like inevitably, I think she will get a job off of her merits. She's put in the work, and I tend to lead towards her, like, after Popovich leaves, I think she'll probably get the Spurs job. That seems like definitely.
I think he'll make sure of that.
I think he'll make sure of it. I think it's also not a coincidence. She's like doesn't mind staying around there, knowing that you could get a good organization and a good opportunity. But I mean, the bigger question is like, we shouldn't think of it as like, oh, it's because she's a woman, she's getting the job. Because like, especially for her, it's not. She's put in like years in terms of coaching. She's been the assistant coach there. Like for her, it would be a completely fair and just opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think what hurts the Blazers a little bit more is, and it's obviously not their fault that it happened this way, but Jason Kidd, even though his was also 2001, having a domestic violence issue with his wife. So I think like part of the optics there, it really doesn't help. But I do think that she'll get a job eventually.
I think so.
And I think there's going to be a lot of people like, oh, maybe next year when, I mean, every year, what is it, 6-7 teams usually fire their head coach. So.
You know, Jason Kidd's, and I didn't bring him up, but Jason Kidd's played out well. And so we could touch on that really, really quick. Maybe we can talk about that more next week, because there's two factors there with Jason Kidd. His played out very, very publicly because he was just becoming a star player, and his wife and his little son was at every game, and they seemed like the All-American family. So people were really shocked when that came out with him. But the other part is that Dallas has just come off of this whole thing where, you know, Mark Cuban had to fire everybody in the front office because of the atmosphere there that was a lot of sexual harassment and things like that. Not assault, but a lot of harassment, inappropriate behavior, things like that. But yet he brought Jason Kidd back. But Jason Kidd is huge to that team, right?
Yeah.
2 times around. But that one was a head scratcher to me. And again, I'm not saying Kidd didn't deserve a second chance. He's paid his dues. He's also, I think, tried to be a model citizen, except for the spilling of the drink that time or whatever. But he's tried to be a model citizen actually since. And he obviously is a very good coach. I mean, he's done well in both places that he was at. But that one we could get into a little bit more too, because Mark Cuban, while he really did, I thought, a great job, because I mean, he weeped on national television saying, I didn't know all this was happening on my team. And he swiftly got rid. He didn't wait for the NBA. He got rid of everybody that was involved with, except Carlisle, who wasn't involved in anything, but everybody else in the whole front office went.
Yeah.
And so that was a little bit of a head scratcher. We also need to touch on Trevor Bauer, and we're running out of time though. And so we may need to let that play out a little bit more. Trevor Bauer obviously became a star here first in Cleveland, and has just been an outstanding pitcher, one of the best pitchers in baseball for the last 5-6 years. And this kind of came out of nowhere. But if you read the actual assault, it is horrible. It is just horrifying. Not that any sexual assault is, okay, that wasn't that bad. They're all horrifying. This one seems especially violent and a few other things. Yeah, horrific. Absolutely. So we'll see what happens with him. We'll save that for next week. We'll be able to talk about a few things next week. So can we get this guy back? I mean,
I'm absolutely, yes.
He's always way too busy for us. It's like he's blowing us off all the time. He has all these offers. All right, so let's get ready to wrap up. This has been a lot of fun to do this in person. We don't get to do this often. So why don't you take us home?
All right, so live from Cleveland. This is Kenny Squared and
Kenny and
Nick LaChance.
Yeah, with the sports. Okay, you
positive tip. Oh, there you go.
There you go. And we will talk to you real soon. Take care, everybody.